We've been talking about the anti-trans sports conversation for a long time. I've personally been embroiled in this discussion for years, even if it's not something I necessarily started talking about on my channel before fairly recently. Like when I started streaming, I started talking about this issue more because it's come up more within the last couple of years. The idea that, oh, trans women can't play in women's sports, it's an unfair advantage, and, men who just want to win the competitions are going to join, and then there's going to be no such thing as women's sports anymore. They're going to completely eliminate, like, women won't even ever be able to compete. And, like, honestly, I personally think that that's silly because human beings are only a little bit sexually dimorphic. There are some average differences, but frankly, if you let men and women compete, they will even out more or less if you account for things like height and weight. Amazing, have height and weight classes. There isn't actually substantial evidence that testosterone at any point in your life gives you like an overwhelming significant advantage. So the stats are not there. But the conversation's been ongoing for a long time. And there's this claim of unfairness and, why, if you are worried about, quote, men pretending to be women in order to gain access to the leagues, like, why would you punish all women for that instead of just having enough scrutiny to make sure that someone isn't just cheating? And there is scrutiny on that because at the Olympic level, in order to gain access to participation, you have to be on hormone therapy for a certain amount of time. Your current blood level of testosterone has to be below a certain level if you're trans, and that level is like lower than what a lot of cis women have. Especially cis women athletes tend to have like a slightly higher level of testosterone than the general population, I think. And trans women's level has to be below that of the average cis woman. So there's just like no man who truly identifies as a man is going to be willing to go through the hormone treatment and that period of time that's required before they can participate. In fact, we know this because Ben Shapiro helped produce that stupid comedy movie, I say comedy very loosely, called Lady Ballers, where these guys pretend to be women in order to win at basketball, basically. They originally wanted to make that a documentary, but none of the men that they were looking at having in it were willing to go on hormone therapy in order to join women's teams. So there you go. We have proof that this is not how things work. If you're enjoying this video, hit the like button, maybe subscribe, hit all notifications if you want. Feel free to check out the links in the description. You might find some merch you like, or you can hit up the Patreon to support the content and find free stuff. So, in the midst of all that, it is nice to have some people out there being the voice of reason. There are so many stupid little nitpicky things that transphobic people will try to tear apart, and it's nice to see some pro-trans sentiment once in a while. So that's what we're going to talk about today, some pro-trans sentiment. And, the backlash, of course. Yeah, the annoying thing is that these conversations are heavily nuanced and cool, like all the science is, but transphobic people are incapable of grasping the simplest concepts, so we spend the whole time trying to communicate fundamentals. Yeah, like they can't get past the initial hurdle of their reflexive sense that, oh, men are obviously stronger than women. Like, yeah, on average, that is the case for the most part. But if you account for height and weight, and also like that's also talking about the average general population where men tend to have labor jobs and women tend to have domestic jobs, and like in higher levels of athletic performance where they're both doing athletics, the differences like average out to being like less extreme for sure. Anyway, South Carolina head coach Dawn Staley makes a positive statement in support of trans rights. Let's see. So she's just been asked if she thinks trans women should play in the sports.
If you're a woman, you should play. If you consider yourself a woman and you want to play sports or vice versa, you should be able to play. That's my opinion.
It's so simple. Look at that.
You want me to go deeper?
Do you think transgender women should be able to participate
that's your question you want
basketball?
Me to ask. I mean, you want to ask, so I'll give you that. Yes.
Look at that.
So now the barnstorm of people are going to flood my timeline and be a distraction to me on one of the biggest days of our game, and I'm okay with that. I really am.
I love that. Yeah. Her response also has the wherewithal to correctly point out how people are asking in bad faith. Like I'm in the middle of the Final Four championship, apparently. That's what the background of this video indicates. She's like, this is one of the biggest games of the year, potentially of her career. I don't even know. And she's just like, yeah, you're asking me this, and like, my opinion is yes, you should be able to participate in the sports. She did not qualify that at all. She wasn't like, oh, if you've gone through male puberty, then da-da-da-da-da. She's literally like, if you identify as a woman, you should be able to play with the women. If you identify as a man, you should be able to play with the men. After this statement, her team went on to rock their championship game and finished the season undefeated. Yo! And the funny thing about this is that you've got 5th place losers like Riley Gaines. So Riley Gaines, 5th place swimming finisher, says that coach who we were just talking about is, quote, entirely incompetent or a sellout for saying that trans women should be allowed to play women's sports. It's like, you can't claim that she's not competent because she won. Like, her team won their season undefeated. So, okay, tied for 5th place, Riley Gaines thinks that she's an expert, that she's more competent than Dawn Staley. I don't think so. Oh, okay, so she did quote tweet later and say, yeah, I stand by what I said. Personally, I think she's a sellout. I also think she's a dang good coach. So she can be both at the same time. So you tried to nail her credibility by saying she's not even good at her job, but then she's good at her job. So you have to just claim to be, oh, she's a sellout. Yeah, if there's anybody who's an expert on being a sellout, it's Riley Gaines. Like, Riley Gaines, I think she makes a lot of money making appearances on Fox News and like going around places to talk about her experience. And like, potentially she's going to get signed to like some company that wants to use her image to make them look better to the conservatives that they serve. Like, I'm sure that Riley Gaines is benefiting from this materially. And because of that, because there is a probably multi-million-dollar media apparatus to like sell the story that she's telling against trans people, yeah, I guess if you're on that side of things, you might assume that there is some, media apparatus with a bunch of stuff going into it, like on the Democrat side or on the liberal side, like, oh, you're pushing this agenda. You're on the payroll of George Soros or whatever. Like, but there isn't an equivalent. We know this because leftist channels don't get that big. Like, how many pretty sizable conservative outlets are there online compared to how many sizable explicitly leftist creators or channels there are online? One of them obviously is being funded by think tanks. Yeah, Riley Gaines, I guess I should have front-loaded that a little bit better, but Riley Gaines, it was a swimmer, and she competed in a swim meet where Leah Thomas, who is a transgender woman, was participating, and she tied for 5th place in one of the races. And I think that maybe it might have been a race where Leah Thomas was in it. So she won. She did more poorly than the trans woman and 4 other women on the team, and she has now made a career out of like, oh my God, this was so horrible, having to compete against this man pretending to be a woman and having to change in the locker room with this, quote, fully intact male, like, all that kind of rhetoric. Yeah, she lost to 4 cis women as well. But yeah, someone who is like an expert at her field being called like incompetent and a sellout by a young woman who like she was good enough to be at the race in the first place. And it was like a pretty decent competition. Okay. I'm not saying that she was like incapable of competitive swimming, but that she was not in the top echelon, and she is unable to accept that and therefore has to make it all about the fact that there was a trans competitor in the race. Yeah, she could have been remembered as like being a halfway decent collegiate swimmer, and instead she will be forever remembered as a bigot and perpetual loser. Just like a sore loser. That's the main thing that people are going to remember you as. Compared to Dawn Staley, who is going to be remembered as an ally and a woman who was damn good at her job and who didn't make any money off of this, and in fact is going to be dealing with a wave of harassment during one of the most important times in her career. Yeah, the whole conservative party. Sore losers. Sore losers, get used to it. Get good, son. Get used to it. Sore winners just as often too. Yeah, they're not really nice when they win either. Thank you, my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Amanda B., Michelle Frateroli, Wellington Marcus, Michelle Winter, Danielle McDonald, Suzanne Maynard, DZXN, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Ella V. Nobody, Pasnell Infinity, Jamie Jam, Sojo, Nova, Elizabeth Bartell, Athiet, Kevin Young, Desi Quiche, Celeste, Liam Hodgson, and Mr. Atheist.